Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I made a boo-boo this morning, so we're moving forward. First, we want to acknowledge the indigenous land on which TAO is headquartered. The Portland metro area rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River, creating communities and summer encampments to harvest and use the plentiful natural resources of the area. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second installment of I Am Tech Oregon, sponsored by First Tech Federal Credit Union. First Tech is more than just a bank. First Tech is a member-owned financial institution that's powered by a people before profit philosophy. For those of you I haven't been able to meet, and I'm sorry about that, please make sure we connect after today. I am Justin Martinez. I go by he, him, his pronouns, and I am TAO's event and program coordinator. I am joined today by the fabulous Kara Snow, Chief Community Engagement Officer, providing back-end support of Zoom. Now, before we get started, here is how we have today set up. All participants have been muted. Please remain on mute unless a TAO staff member unmutes you and calls on you to talk. You may ask or respond to questions in the chat box publicly or privately by directing your message to me or Kara, and we'll continue to monitor the chat and respond throughout the discussion. We also ask that you engage via the participant icon on your screen. We have allotted for time for audience Q&A via Mentimeter. You can access the Q&A tool by scanning the QR code on your screen or visiting menti.com and using the voting code C6116362. We'll also share these access details again once we reach the audience Q&A section. We would also love to have you engage with us on social media during the call and throughout the day. We'd love to hear what participants learned and share their experience. Now on to the fun stuff. I have personally had the pleasure of seeing our guest today speak twice, and I'm super excited to have this opportunity to sit down and chat. Please join me in welcoming Daelynn Moyer. Hi, Daelynn.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Now, as we've been promoting this event, and I'm sure at this point most people are aware that you're the software engineering manager for Lithia Motors. For audience members who may not be as familiar with your career journey, can you share a bit of how you arrived where you are today?
Sure. It's kind of an interesting story. So let me lay that out for you. Like a lot of other people before me, my college career ended when I met somebody I fell in love, and despite astronomical odds, we had a child. The money ran out. I had to get a job. So I spent the next 10 years as a college dropout working in restaurant and retail jobs. I was a bartender and a pastry chef. I sold clothes. In the mid-90s, I found myself working at Borders Books in the computer section. And thanks to an employee book lending program, I had access to this huge wealth of technical knowledge. I knew that I couldn't work for minimum wage for the rest of my life, so I started reading and reading and reading and reading. Eventually, I learned enough to talk my way into my first white-collar job. I was the resident geek in a small mailing and order fulfillment company. I kind of did everything, maintaining the network and processing mailing lists, whatever they needed. As it turns out, one day what they needed was a custom database application, and they needed it in about 6 weeks. At the time, I didn't really have a good understanding of even what a database was. So I asked them if they'd buy me a book, and they did. And I ended up writing my first application in Microsoft Access and VBA. Seeing people use a thing that I had created out of nothing was a deeply fascinating and motivating experience for me, and I really wanted more of that. So over the years, I kept moving on to increasingly challenging positions, learning more and more along the way, eventually becoming, I guess one would call me an expert in my field. As I approached sort of 20 years or so in the industry, the tech side of things was starting to get a lot less colorful for me, and I started to get a lot more fascinated with human APIs than with technical ones. So I leveraged that into a management role so that I could work with problem spaces that I found more interesting. And as it turns out, I've come full circle. Over the course of my career, I've written software for all kinds of vehicle-related things, be they Boeing jets or electric vehicle charging stations or Freightliner trucks. Now I'm back in the retail space, or the auto vehicle space, working on driveway.com. We're building the next big thing in online car sales. And I'm working there to build solid teams that are based on authenticity and trust and empathy. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that you were also a pastry chef. We'll have to connect. My partner loves a good apple pie, and I know that you make a fabulous apple pie from some of your stories you shared before. So we'll have to trade some recipes on that.
All right. But
yeah.
Everybody who's here, like, don't tell anybody. I don't do requests. I'm not available for hire. I will not make you a tiramisu.
Good to know. Okay. Now, as you were entering the tech industry or the workforce for that matter, did you see yourself represented among your peers and or leadership? And from your own personal journey, why do you think that is or isn't?
I mean, that's kind of an interesting and nuanced question, more nuanced than one might think, given that I'm a transgender person and I have sort of a tale of two careers of pre-transition and post-transition. But I'm leaning towards saying no, that most software engineers at that time had degrees. Most of them were straight, white, cisgender men. And I'm 100% certain that in the late 90s, if I'd have had a lot more difficulty finding work and getting hired as a trans person. The LGBTQ representation among tech workers in the late 90s was scarce.
Yeah.
I feel like that arose quite a bit out of this feedback loop that at the time, tech was not well understood among those who didn't practice it. And it was sort of treated as like this black art by a lot of organizations. And that set up this sort of self-perpetuating culture in which the people who understood tech looked for people that looked like them who understood tech. And that went on for a long time. But as we see this sort of increasing recognition that coding is just a trade skill, it's really no different than masonry or car servicing or electrical work. Mm-hmm. We've begun to see this really vast increase in opportunity for differing backgrounds. Trade work doesn't require a degree. You don't need a degree to build houses, though it helps if you're designing them. Similar, you don't need a degree to write software, though it helps if you're writing compilers or CPU firmware. But this advent of code as trade, I think, has really fundamentally shifted the diversity and range of experiences and backgrounds and colors and belief systems that we see in the tech marketplace, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's very well put. That's great insight. We asked Tony yesterday this same question, and it was funny to hear his answer because he was like, well, yeah, of course, and I still have this. But I'm curious about how you've experienced imposter syndrome and kind of how if you continue to still experience this. I know you're new in your position, and like every time you have a new job and you're still doing something very similar, I personally feel, like, do I deserve to be here, or am I doing this correctly? Is that something you struggle with at all?
Absolutely. I've been in this industry nearly 25 years, and I still often wake up wondering, like, is today the day that my peers and my superiors realize that I have no idea what I'm doing and that I'm a total fraud? I spend most of my time, most every day, trying to hide the fact that I'm just making stuff up as I go along. Like, surely they aren't just paying me to make it up. But here's that's sort of the dirty secret here, right? Nobody knows what they're doing, and we're all just making it up. Like, what's important right now? What's the best way to do it? What's going to happen if we fail or succeed? All of that is just made up. So the fact that a lot of the time I don't know how to deal with something. Like my brain can tell me that this is just how humans work. My heart is not always convinced. But fortunately, it's usually my brain that wins out, and I show up and I get the work done, and I guess I do a good job because people keep me around. So
Yeah, yeah, that's well put. Do you have any suggestions for others who might be really struggling with that imposter syndrome, and like how you would suggest they try and overcome that?
I can only speak for myself and sort of the routines and constructs that have worked really well for me. And this is true whether I'm feeling disempowered, whether I'm feeling like a fraud, whether I'm feeling like I have no skill or no influence or no ability to really affect change, is that I ask myself, okay, well, that feeling aside, what would I be doing right now if I did feel that way? What would I be doing today if I did feel empowered? What would I be doing today if I did feel like I could affect change? And just like choose one of those things. Just do what, doesn't matter which one, just pick one and do it. It's going to feel useless the first time you do it because you're not convinced that you have the power to do it, but just do it anyway. And you're going to find that that gives you just enough inertia and momentum to do the next one, which gives you just a little bit more inertia and momentum to do the next one. And next thing you know, it's 5 o'clock and you get to breathe again, and you get to, you know, talk yourself down from that anxiety that you've built up over the day. But modeling your behavior after what you would be doing if you had what you wished you had is ultimately going to manufacture the thing that you wish you had. You may
Yeah,
not always feel like it has, and you may feel like you're a fraud, but the fact is you're not, right? Because you're doing the things that you say matter, and you're doing the things that you say create change, and you're doing the things that make a difference. And ultimately, there's nothing that's going to just turn off your fear that you're a fraud. But if you can do those things, you can at least convince yourself that you are behaving with integrity, that you are doing something meaningful, and that you're doing the work.
yeah, excellent. I love that. Now, what we kind of, I mean, we touched a bit on how you experienced, creating something from nothing, and that really drove your interest. Can you expand on that a little bit more, and what originally got you interested in that particular field of work, and why you wanted to continue doing that?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it was working for minimum wage that got me into tech in the first place, because that was a terrible way to live. I had my first real exposure to computer technology in junior high when I was, as a tag kid, I was offered a slot in an extra credit class called computers. And this was back in what, 1982 or something. I learned how to write BASIC on a Radio Shack TRS-80, and I had a lot of fun, but I didn't have a computer at home, and I didn't really touch computers again in any meaningful way for a long time. But my dad had worked in tech for decades. And when the time came for me to start really thinking about white collar work, I asked him, like, well, I don't have a degree. I don't have any meaningful professional experience. What do you think I can do? And he encouraged me to start learning about networking in particular. Novell NetWare, he said, become a certified NetWare administrator. As some of you are chuckling, and you're probably all over 40. So between that and my access to book knowledge, along with just a general sense that I knew something about computers, it seemed like a viable path. I did not, at the time anyway, know that it was going to turn into some kind of long-term career. I was just happy to be working regular hours in an office and not having to ask mom for grocery money. As it turned out, it's also a pretty, at least for me anyway, it was a pretty gratifying career that you know, felt a lot more meaningful than just trading my backbreaking labor for money.
Yeah. It sounds like you've really enjoyed it and doing it for 26 years. What would you say has been your favorite thing about your career so far?
I feel like I have developed a place for myself in my life and in my career where I have a significant degree of influence over my experiences at work, and I have the authority to affect meaningful change, both for myself and the people that report to me. And that feels really good. Obviously, I haven't been a manager that whole time. Before moving into leadership, of course, I liked the generous pay and benefits packages that one tends to find in tech. I liked that it offered variety, but not too much variety. I liked that people seemed to value my skills and contributions. And over time, I came to really like being viewed as an expert. I think one of the great things about tech is that expertise and the status of expertise and the prestige of expertise is available to anyone who's willing to put in the effort. I won't say that tech is a true meritocracy, because it's not, but from a knowledge and practitioner perspective, I think it is. I think anybody can learn amazing skills and write a book. Anybody can speak a keynote at a conference, you know, and I really love that tech is, at least in that way, blind and allows anybody to succeed.
Yeah. Expanding a little bit on your favorite thing, what would you say would be the top 2 best career decisions you ever made?
I don't know that any one or decision really stands out as the best, but maybe it was these: getting really comfortable with public speaking and getting really comfortable with conversations around accountability. Like, those are skill sets that have fundamentally altered the trajectory of my career for the better. It's changed the ways that I communicate and connect with people, not just with the room, but with individuals and even in my personal relationships. Reducing the fear I had around communication of all kinds will make one an exponentially more powerful presence. I think the proverb of sort of getting comfortable with discomfort is clever, but the real meat on those bones is in learning how to navigate situations in which you are afraid or apprehensive. If I could make a recommendation to anyone on how to build up their career, especially if you're early in your career, it would be to find a way to practice public speaking. Maybe join Toastmasters or something. Get involved in networking organizations and hold tech talks, whatever. Get comfortable being the person who owns the room. And 2, read the books Crucial Conversations and Crucial Accountability. If you can nail the skills in those books, and you can nail the skills of talking in a room, everything is available to you, and you will have untold opportunity open to you that you did not before, because you'll know how to advocate for yourself. You'll know how to challenge things in a healthy and constructive way. And you'll know how to engage with people in a leadership position.
Yeah, I love the idea of engaging in public speaking and how that really empowers you. And I have to say that listening to you talk on the 2 other times that I was able to, it's kind of what prompted me to do this. I'm typically in a much more supportive role and not very front and center. But it was inspiring to see you talk and tell your story and command a presence like that it really inspired me to do the same thing. So thank you very much. I'm looking so much more forward to seeing your future speaking endeavors. And
oh my goodness, thank you
so
so
I
much.
really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Now I'm going to change the question of this, the phrasing of this question, because I asked it yesterday with Tony, and I, I so the question originally was, what's the worst career decision you've ever made? And I was thinking about it for myself, that even the bad decisions I made, I learned something from them, that they were still valuable. So I kind of want to take it more in that direction. Like, what is perhaps a mistake or an error that you made that you don't necessarily regret per se, because you learned a lot out of it, or you got a lot of value out of the experience? Is there any one thing that stands out for you?
Uh, yes. And I think that, like, there's no, I don't know that I can point actually to it, like the last question. I don't know that there's one particular instance that comes to mind, but what I know is that, like, nothing's been particularly catastrophic in my career, and everything has led to where I am today. And, like, in a butterfly effect sort of way, I couldn't have removed any of those pieces and still end up here.
Mm-hmm.
It may be that where I ended up would be even better in some way. I don't know, doesn't matter, but I like where I am. And if that means that I had to have the journey that I had, then so be it. But there have been a few decisions that I have regretted, and wished that I had made them differently. Generally speaking, those decisions that I regretted most are the ones where I prioritized money over other things that were more important to me, like work culture or interesting work or even ethical considerations. Ultimately, I've never gone wrong when I have made choices that favored my values. When I made value-based decisions, but, you know, looking for empathy and compassion and connection and community, the right thing, like, those are the things that I say that I stand for and that are really important to me. And when I favored them over money, it always worked out well. Like, when I chase money, I generally often I end up missing it. And when I chase my values, I invariably find that the money part kind of takes care of itself. You know, and that doesn't mean you can't negotiate for more lucrative offers and such, but only if the other stuff is that foundational stuff is already in place. Because, like, what I have learned from my regrettable decisions is that more money is not going to make a terrible job better. It's just going to be more money that
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
you're going to buy that money. You're going to buy every penny of that money, and it is going to cost you.
Yeah. Well, I have one more question before we do some quick audience Q&A. How do you think your 10-year-old self would react to what you do today?
I think that's a really interesting question. And for me, it's sort of a tale of two childhoods. Like, and I think a lot of transgender people would sort of resonate with this, but there's the childhood I lived and the childhood that I wished I'd lived. And in that same way, I cannot always fully separate the professional and the personal, because it is the professional that has afforded me my personal. So that question has a couple of interesting moving parts to it. I think if I were to describe my job to like the technical parts of my job to my 10-year-old self, she'd probably wish I'd stopped talking about it. But if I were to describe my life to a 10-year-old self, and the ways in which that I get to spend my days engaging with people to build authenticity and connection and relationships, well, I mean, that language wouldn't resonate with her, but the idea would. She'd be thrilled. She'd be thrilled that she gets to be a she. She'd be thrilled that she rides motorcycles. She'd be thrilled that she has a loving wife and amazing daughter. And she'd be thrilled that she is enjoying her life and her work.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you. We're going to open the floor really quick to some audience Q&A.
Awesome.
So on your screen, you should see your different ways of accessing Mentimeter. You can go to menti.com and enter the voting code below, or you can scan the QR code that's on your screen. You can submit questions for Daelynn.
I think Mentimeter is such a fascinating tool.
Isn't it interesting? There's some other really cool things we're starting to do with it too. Like it can make word clouds in real time. We were doing some like, it lets you do quizzes, and we were doing wine trivia with a couple of other events, which is kind of fun. So we're hoping to use it a little more often.
Yeah, I've seen it show up in some unexpected places, and it had interesting and unexpected and delightful results.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have some questions coming in.
Oh, interesting. I'm not seeing anything.
Here's our first one. As someone who's self-taught, do you buy a lot of books for your coworkers and employees and your daughter?
And my daughter. Well, in fact, this weekend was my daughter's 29th birthday, and one of the things I bought her was a book. So yes, I believe really deeply in the value of the printed word. I generally support my employees less with books and more with educational opportunities. Whether that's a subscription to a tutorial service or admission and lodging and travel to a conference, or just, showering them with my delightful wisdom. But I don't tend anymore anyway to buy a lot of books for coworkers and employees. When I do, it's because it's a gift and because I think it's an exceptional opportunity for them to grow. I might give someone a copy of Crucial Accountability if they've just moved into their first management role or something like that.
Nice.
But generally speaking, in terms of like being in the tech industry, I find that printed books carry a lot less value than they used to because technology is changing so quickly. And by the time a book goes to print, it's already stale.
Yeah. A few more coming in. What are ways that you build authenticity with the folks you manage?
Mm-hmm. Well, a few different things, but ultimately they all boil down to building trust. Nobody will ever be authentic with you if they don't trust you. And the ways that you can build trust as a manager involve being authentic and vulnerable yourself to a degree that is professionally appropriate, being really clear about your expectations and your background and your interests. One of the things that I've done at work is to write a fairly lengthy README about myself, so that as people come on board, they get a really crystal idea of like, how do I expect our communications to look like? What do I expect of them? And to reiterate too, and I go into this during our first one-on-one too, is just to really lay out in absolute crystal certainty that I trust them, that I hired them and I trust them, and that it's okay if it takes them a little longer to trust me. But the most important thing is that they know I trust them. I trust them to want to be better than they are. I trust them to have good intent. And I trust them to be doing the best that they can at any given time. And I trust them to share with me if something is keeping them from being better, whether it's, some personal issue that's distracting them or some cultural issue at work that's preventing them from really engaging, whatever it is. I've tried my hardest to make it very clear to them that those things are important to me, and their success is important to me, not because my own performance is graded on that, but because I care about them as human beings.
Yeah, that's lovely. We have another one coming up. Which books would you recommend for someone hoping to learn more about tech?
I guess that sort of depends on what kind of question this is. Is the question like, how can I better my skill set as a technologist, then I don't know that I would recommend books. I would recommend tools. I would recommend you learn tools. A lot of tool sets are sort of the new hotness, but ultimately those are indicators of where the industry is going. And if those are the things, if you want to be a better technologist, those are the things you need to keep on top of. So attend conferences and learn about new things and keep abreast of release notes on tools that you're already invested in. But if the question here is more about how to be a more effective tech professional, like that's a very different kind of question. And I think there are a variety of different books out there that I think have perennial and ongoing value, even if they were written quite a while ago. Code Complete and The Pragmatic Programmer are a couple of my favorites. They're both pretty nitty gritty, down in the weeds kind of stuff. And I think that if you have an interest in, at any point, moving into technical leadership, there are two books I wanted to recommend, but the title of the second one escapes me. The other is Brooks's The Mythical Man Month. Really getting engaged and understanding the dynamics of body count and the dynamics of organization through that lens was really powerful, and shifted my own way of interacting with my team.
Awesome. Our next question is, how does your journey influence your hiring approach?
I think I feel like it influences it through my willingness to talk to people that don't have traditional backgrounds, and to really be able to talk to them during the interview, to focus less on their tech skills. Like a technical interview that is a trivia contest or a trivia game is not much good to me. Like, I don't care how well you understand the inner workings of the .NET transpiler, and I don't care how much you know about the differences between ES5 and ES6. What I care about is, like, how do you go about learning things? And are you a person that I can succeed at coaching? Are you a person that is going to be as invested in their success as I'm invested in it? And are they someone who's going to be upfront and honest with me about their experiences and about their about the ways in which they engage with work? Those things like, ultimately, I can teach anyone to code. It's just a trade, right? I can teach you to ride a bicycle. I can teach you to ride a motorcycle. I can teach you to code. But only if you're someone that I can connect with, and through those lenses of coachability, and through those lenses of accountability, and through those lenses of trust and authenticity and empathy. If we don't have those, the chances of there being success in our relationship are relatively slim. So yeah, that's how it influences my hiring approach. It's much more about the humanity of the people I'm talking to than the things they have memorized.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to thank you again, Daelynn, for spending the time to chat with us today. I am very excited to see things that you're doing in the future. Definitely want to stay connected, and I know for sure we'll be working together really soon in 2021, which I'm excited for some new announcements about that. We're going to go ahead and start wrapping things up for today. I want to thank First Tech Federal Credit Union for sponsoring this week's series. If you liked today, you're more than welcome to also join us, where we'll be interviewing Victor Villegas, Technology and Media Support Coordinator with Oregon State University, tomorrow. And as always, you can follow us on social media. We're at Tech Oregon. We're also on LinkedIn. You can follow the hashtag #IamTechOregon for more updates. Thank you very much, Daelynn, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Folks, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Though if you include a note, it's more likely I'll accept your connection request. So just bear that in mind, especially if you have a sales title attached to you. But thank you so much. It was a pleasure to speak with you all this morning, and have a great day.
Bye-bye, everyone.